In that discussion, my neurologist just gave me 5 to 7 years.
Why did a MAID provider give her a timeline so different from her neurologist? Rebecca Luna was a 49-year-old TikTok creator from Victoria, British Columbia, and a mother of 2 daughters. She chose to end her life through Canada's Medical Assistance in Dying program, more commonly referred to as MAID, on July 25th, 2026. She died at approximately 1:15 p.m. surrounded by loved ones. Her story is reigniting debate over how MAID is applied in this country. So let's look at the specifics of her case. According to her TikTok videos, Luna first publicly revealed her diagnosis in 2025, just over a year ago, when she was 48.
I am in the very early stages of a diagnosis of early onset Alzheimer's. I'm 48 years old.
She had noticed cognitive changes as early as age 46. She had forgetfulness, spatial problems, and other subtle symptoms that she initially blamed on premenopause, stress, and ADHD. But after years of MRIs, CT scans, and specialist visits, the formal diagnosis of young onset Alzheimer's arrived. In a Czech news segment that she later posted on her TikTok, she described the shock of walking into what she thought was a routine appointment and walking out with a formal diagnosis and a time frame. In her videos, Luna said her neurologist gave her roughly 5 to 7 years before she would be in what she described in her words, bedbound, needing to be fed, dressed, and in places I don't want to be.
In that discussion, my neurologist just gave me 5 to 7 years until I'm like bedbound, needing to be fed, dressed, in places I don't want to be.
Early on, she described meeting a MAID provider informally. After she listed her symptoms and what she considered intolerable suffering, that provider reportedly told her she already met the criteria, was in an advanced stage, and estimated about 3 years until her quality of life would fall below her personal threshold. She later underwent a full formal assessment, and in her video, she captioned, "Apparently I will be passing a lot sooner than anticipated." She explained that the assessing MAID doctor, after reviewing her extensive neurologist notes and her rapid progression, told her the quality of life she was willing to accept would last only 1 to 2 years at most, leaning more towards 1 and possibly less. She said she could have the procedure as soon as the next day if she wished she was officially approved. That compressed timeline became the tipping point. Luna had initially planned for early August. She moved the date forward to July 25th because, as she put it in some of her final videos, she was living in a body that no longer felt comfortable, safe, good, nothing.
I can't remember conversations at all. I'll be in the middle of a conversation, know exactly what I'm talking about, and then all of a sudden I'll stop talking.
She described profound apathy, mood swings, falls, moments of confusion such as believing she was in a movie theater when she was lying in her own bed, and an overwhelming sense that the suffering had already become enough. She was in shock, she said, yet also felt the shorter prognosis matched what her body was telling her. She first began speaking publicly about the diagnosis in 2025 and built a following of more than 90,000 people who watched her document the progression, her grief, the daily meetings she attended to protect her sobriety. And she set up a GoFundMe page that was originally to help her achieve bucket list goals before her death. But due to her diminished ability to work, that soon became a fund to pay her bills, her rent, and creating a fund for her 2 adult daughters after she was gone. A later fundraiser focused on end-of-life expenses so her family would not carry funeral costs on top of their grief. Her eldest daughter, Maya Findley, later confirmed the death and posted tributes describing a grief that felt like homesickness. Think MAID is out of control in Canada. Head to helpnothomicide.com. Canadians deserve proper care, not prompt dispatching at the hands of some overly eager medical professional. If you agree that medical assistance in dying is not a cure for depression, poverty, despair, sign the petition. That's helpnothomicide.com. But her case, of course, raises questions about the system used to end her life. Why did a MAID provider give her a timeline so different from her neurologist? The neurologist specializes in the disease itself and its trajectory. The MAID assessor's role is to determine eligibility under the law, whether the condition is grievous and irremediable, whether the person has decision-making capacity, and whether the suffering is intolerable to that person. Yet in this instance, the MAID doctor's prognosis of 1 to 2 years, based on the same clinical notes plus Luna's self-reported symptoms and her personal definition of quality of life, became the decisive number that shaped her remaining time. So who possessed the greater clinical authority to speak about how long she would retain the capacities she valued? And once that shorter number was spoken aloud by the person who could actually administer the lethal drugs, how free was the subsequent decision? Canada's MAID program has expanded far beyond its original framing. Track 1 is for those whose natural death is reasonably foreseeable. Track 2 allows people whose death is not reasonably foreseeable, provided they meet other criteria of intolerable suffering from a grievous and irremediable condition. This is the pathway that has opened MAID to people with disabilities, chronic illness, and other non-terminal conditions. Sole mental illness as the underlying condition is still excluded until March of 2027, but the clock is ticking. Discussions about mature minors have occurred in parliamentary committees. While the law currently requires age 18, the conversation itself signals how far the Overton window has moved. Consider the documented cases that highlight how accessible the program has become. In one Ontario example, a doctor assessed a 45-year-old man with Crohn's disease and a history of mental health issues for MAID outside of a Tim Hortons. The doctor later drove the man to the facility where the lethal injection was administered. The regulator placed the physician under supervision, citing concerns about conducting a sensitive assessment in a public parking lot and about professional boundaries. That is not an isolated illustration of informality. Stories continue to surface of people offered MAID in emergency rooms for treatable conditions, or of disabled Canadians who report feeling pressure when social supports are inadequate. And now a new proposal has entered the medical literature. In a paper published in the New England Journal of Medicine in July 2026, Canadian critical care physicians and a Harvard bioethicist floated the idea of death by organ donation. Instead of waiting for the heart to stop after the lethal drugs are given, organs would be retrieved from a sedated but still living MAID patient in the operating room, with the organ removal itself causing death. The authors argue this would improve organ quality by reducing ischemic time. Critics, including bioethicists, have called the idea ghoulish and a violation of the long-standing dead donor rule. Canada already leads in world organ donation after euthanasia. The suggestion that death itself could be engineered around organ retrieval shows how thoroughly the original boundaries have been rewritten. And this actually brought me back to a report I did on a documentary I went to the screening of called State Organs, which investigates allegations of, albeit forced, organ harvesting from prisoners of conscience in CCP China. It delves into the personal accounts of those who witnessed organ harvesting from live patients, prisoners, and it is just as horrifying as it sounds. MAID was sold to Canadians as carefully limited last resort for those facing imminent, unbearable dying. It is increasingly functioning as an accessible medical option, sometimes assessed in parking lots, sometimes with timelines that diverge sharply from the treating specialists, and sometimes discussed in the same breath as organ harvesting. For people like Rebecca Luna, who faced real and progressive neurological disease and who articulated clear wishes about the kind of life she was unwilling to live, the personal tragedy is evident. The policy question is whether a system this expansive, this rapid, and this willing to compress prognosis deserves to be called a last resort, or whether it has become something closer to a prescribed exit that is far too easy to reach. It's certainly a divisive topic amongst Canadians and, well, around the world, because Canada's MAID program often makes worldwide news.